One peaceful afternoon, the quiet routine of Emma's small farm was abruptly shattered by the thunderous roar of motorcycle engines. A gang of bikers stormed onto her land, their heavy boots kicking up dust as they parked haphazardly. The men, clad in worn leather jackets and covered in tattoos, moved with an air of entitlement, setting up camp and lighting fires as if the land were theirs to claim. The acrid scent of gasoline and smoke filled the air, mixing with the natural freshness of the countryside. Emma, though just a young girl, was not one to be easily intimidated. Her small frame stood firm amidst the growing tension, her sharp blue eyes filled with silent defiance. Though she could not speak, her actions spoke louder than words. With a single motion, she called her K9 dogs to her side, trained, disciplined, and ready. The loyal animals stood in formation, their ears perked, muscles tensed, waiting for her silent command. The bikers chuckled at first, amused by the sight of a lone girl standing against them. But as the seconds stretched and Emma did not waver, their laughter faded. There was something unsettling in the way she held her ground, unyielding and fearless. The air between them grew heavy with an unspoken challenge. For the first time, the gang hesitated, realizing that they had misjudged the situation. This was not just an empty farm, and this girl was not just a helpless child. The tallest of the bikers, a man with a jagged scar running from his temple down to his cheek, took a slow step forward, his heavy boots grinding against the dry earth. His presence was imposing, his build solid like a wall of muscle, and the smirk tugging at the corner of his lips was laced with amusement. He looked down at Emma, his dark eyes scanning her small frame, as if sizing up the audacity of a lone girl standing in his way. "What's this?" he drawled, tilting his head slightly, his voice thick with mockery. "You really think a couple of dogs are gonna stop us?" He chuckled, a deep, gravelly sound that was meant to be intimidating, but his fingers twitched slightly at his sides. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Emma caught it. The way his gaze flickered toward the dogs, sharp, calculating, betrayed something he wouldn't say out loud. Uncertainty. Emma didn't flinch. Her expression remained unreadable, her blue eyes locked onto his with quiet defiance. Though she said nothing, her silence carried weight, pressing down on the men like an unseen force. Without a word, she lifted her hand ever so slightly, fingers making the barest motion, an unspoken command. The reaction was immediate. The dogs, who had been standing tense at her sides, bared their teeth in unison. A deep, guttural growl rumbled through the air, low and menacing, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. The sound sent a chill down the spines of the men, primal and foreboding. One of the bikers shifted uncomfortably, his hand instinctively inching toward the knife strapped to his belt. Another muttered something under his breath. The leader's smirk faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flaring as he forced himself to hold her gaze. He wasn't afraid of a kid, he'd fought men twice his size and walked away grinning, but there was something different about this girl. Something unsettling. She was small, fragile-looking even, but the way she carried herself, the way the dogs responded to her without hesitation, it made his stomach twist. A thick silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant crackle of the fire. The night suddenly felt colder. The biker flexed his fingers, suppressing the creeping doubt clawing at the back of his mind. This girl was dangerous, and not in the way he was used to. The leader of the bikers clenched his jaw, his confidence flickering for the first time. He wasn't used to feeling uncertainty, let alone fear. His entire life had been built on strength, intimidation, and the unwavering belief that no one could challenge him and walk away unscathed. But now, standing before this girl and her dogs, something in his gut twisted. His instincts, honed through years of survival in a brutal world, were screaming at him to tread carefully. Emma remained still, her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. The firelight danced across her face, casting eerie shadows that made her expression even harder to read. Her hand, still raised slightly in the air, was neither an attack nor a retreat, it was a warning. A silent promise that if they made the wrong move, there would be consequences. The dogs flanking her were statues of pure muscle, their bodies taut, their golden eyes burning with focus. They weren't just animals defending their master. They were soldiers, waiting for her command. Their low, rumbling growls vibrated through the air, making even the most hardened of the biker gang uneasy. One of the younger bikers, barely more than a boy, shifted his weight nervously. His fingers twitched around the hilt of the knife strapped to his belt, but he didn't dare draw it. Beads of sweat formed in his temple despite the cool night air. "Boss," he whispered, swallowing hard. "Maybe we should just—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, though his own voice lacked its usual iron edge. His eyes never left Emma's. He was searching for weakness, any hint that this was all a bluff, that the girl wasn't as dangerous as she seemed. But he found nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. The fire crackled in the background, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled over the confrontation. The leader exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across his face. His pride screamed at him to put this girl in her place, to show his men that no one, especially not some lone girl with a couple of mutts, defied him. But pride was a dangerous thing. It made men reckless. And reckless men ended up dead. Finally, he let out a low chuckle, though it lacked the arrogance of before. "All right," he muttered, lifting his hands in mock surrender. His voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge of frustration. "You win this one, sweetheart." He took a step back, the leather of his boots crunching against the dirt. The other bikers hesitated, unsure whether to follow. Their leader gave them a sharp look, and one by one, they turned away, melting into the darkness of the night. Emma didn't move. Not until the last one had disappeared from sight. Only then did she allow herself to breathe, her shoulders loosening ever so slightly. But her grip on control never wavered. The dogs sensed it too. Their growls softened, their rigid postures relaxing. One of them, the larger of the two, nuzzled against her leg, seeking reassurance. Emma reached down and ran her fingers through its thick fur, grounding herself in the warmth of her loyal companions. "Good boys," she whispered, barely audible. The night settled into silence once more, the tension dissolving like smoke in the wind. But Emma knew better than to believe this was over. She had won this round. But next time, they wouldn't walk away so easily. Emma sat motionless, her eyes locked on the shadows where the bikers had disappeared into the night. The harsh revving of their engines had finally faded, leaving a silence that pressed against her ears like a heavy weight. She could still feel the thrum of adrenaline pulsing through her veins, her heartbeat hammering loudly in her chest. Every muscle in her body remained tense, her limbs rigid, unwilling to fully relax even though the immediate danger had passed. The memory of the leader's piercing gaze lingered in her mind, a warning of the threat that still loomed. The fire crackled in the stillness, its flames dancing and casting eerie, shifting shadows across the ground. The warmth of the fire reached her, but it did little to ease the cold knot of fear and tension that tightened in her stomach. She was accustomed to danger, had lived through countless close calls, but there was something about tonight that unsettled her. Something in the leader's hesitation, something that told her this wasn't just a random encounter. They weren't done with her. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, her sharp gaze cutting through the darkness. The dogs were still on alert, their bodies rigid, their ears pricked for any sign of movement. The larger one, the one with the scar across his back, gave a low huff and nudged her leg gently with his nose. Emma didn't flinch. She knew him well enough to understand that this was his way of offering comfort, his way of grounding her when the storm inside threatened to rise to the surface. She reached down to stroke his thick, coarse fur, her fingers lingering as she sought the reassurance she didn't even realize she needed. The dogs weren't just companions. They were her family in this chaotic, unpredictable world. And in that moment, as she ran her fingers through the fur of the loyal animal at her side, she drew strength from their silent presence. They had been with her through thick and thin, never once faltering, never once questioning her decisions. Despite the comfort of the familiar warmth of the fire and the presence of her dogs, the tension in Emma's body didn't ease. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, calculating every possible move. The bikers had been too close for comfort. And that leader, the one who had almost given her an escape, had watched her with a knowing, dangerous look in his eyes. Emma had felt it, felt the recognition in the air between them, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken rules of their world. He had held back, yes, but she knew it wouldn't last. With a sharp intake of breath, Emma stood abruptly, pushing herself up from the log she had been sitting on. Her hand went instinctively to the hilt of the knife she kept at her side, the familiar weight grounding her once again. It wasn't just for protection. It was a symbol, a reminder of what she had to become in order to survive. She had no room for weakness. Not now. Not in a world where mercy was a luxury few could afford. She turned toward the fire, her back to the darkness, and started packing up her belongings with deliberate efficiency. Her movements were practiced, smooth, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The night was still young, but she didn't trust it. She didn't trust the silence. She didn't trust the fact that the danger had seemed to pass so easily. There was no such thing as an easy escape in her world. As she secured her pack and the last of her supplies, her thoughts remained sharp, focused. Where to go next? What routes were safe? Was there enough time to move before they came back? The questions spiraled, each one demanding answers she wasn't sure she had yet. The larger of the two dogs gave a soft whine, his head tilting slightly as if sensing the shift in her mood. Emma paused, meeting the animal's steady gaze for a moment before nodding, as if reaffirming a silent promise to both herself and the dog. She would never stop fighting for her survival. Not when she had so much to lose, and not when the stakes were higher than ever. She paused again, her hand hovering over the pack strap before pulling it tight against her shoulder. The fire crackled once more, sending an orange glow into the blackness around them. The night felt more oppressive now, the weight of its quiet pressing on her chest, making it harder to breathe. The shadows seemed to move in time with her thoughts, twisting and stretching unnaturally. Emma turned her attention back to the dogs, her fingers brushing the scarred ones for once more. She nodded to them, her jaw set in quiet determination. Without another word, she started moving, her steps purposeful, her senses heightened. She knew the world she was in, knew it well. It was a world where enemies never stayed gone for long. A world where survival meant keeping one step ahead of the dangers lurking in the dark. And as the last flickers of the fire died out behind her, Emma didn't look back. She didn't need to. She was already planning her next move, already anticipating what was to come. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The night was eerily quiet, save for the subtle rustling of the leaves beneath Emma's feet as she moved through the dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like dark fingers against the sky, creating a canopy that blocked out the stars. The air was cool, biting at her skin, but the chill was nothing compared to the anxiety gnawing at her insides. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, the kind of pressure that made every step feel heavier than the last. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, a rhythmic thrum that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. She could feel the blood rushing in her ears, the fear and the determination mixing in a volatile concoction inside her. Her mind was a tangled mess of thoughts, fragments of conversations, memories, and uncertainties. But one thing was clear, she had to keep moving. She couldn't afford to stop, not now. The danger was too close, and she knew they were counting on her to lead them to safety. As she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes flickered to the dogs trailing behind her. Their presence was a comfort, a reassurance that she wasn't alone in this struggle. The dogs, trained and loyal, moved with quiet precision, their senses sharper than any human could ever hope to have. She knew they were alert, ready to react to any threat before she even had time to process it. Yet, even their unwavering focus couldn't silence the nagging unease she felt deep inside. Every so often, Emma's pace slowed as she fought to regain her breath, each inhale shallow and quick. The exhaustion was creeping in, her body screaming for rest, but she knew better than to stop. The forest was vast, and the danger loomed larger with every second she wasted. The adrenaline kept her moving, but she could feel the toll it was taking. Her muscles screamed, her limbs felt like lead, but she pushed forward, her resolve hardening with every step. The trees seemed to close in on her, the darkness wrapping around her like a thick, suffocating blanket. She tried not to focus on it, not to let the weight of the night's uncertainty paralyze her, but it was hard. It felt as if the very shadows were closing in on her, pressing in from all sides, ready to consume her. Yet, with every step she took, she reminded herself that she had no other choice but to keep moving. The dogs, moving with unerring instinct, sniffed the air, their senses picking up on something Emma couldn't yet detect. Her stomach tightened. Whatever it was, she could feel it too, a creeping sense of danger that made her muscles tense, her senses go on high alert. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing, but the fear was there, bubbling just beneath the surface. Her mind raced, wondering how much farther they had to go, how much longer they could keep up the pace. The exhaustion was starting to cloud her judgment, but she had to stay sharp. She had to stay ahead. Her mind flashed back to the faces of the people she was trying to protect, those counting on her. She couldn't fail them. Not now. With a renewed surge of determination, Emma quickened her pace, her steps sure and steady once more. The dogs followed, ever faithful, their presence a silent promise that they would get through this together. The night was still dark, still fraught with danger, but Emma refused to let fear control her. She would keep moving, for herself, for them, and for the hope that, despite the overwhelming odds, they could still find a way out of the nightmare that seemed to close in with every passing moment.